Thank you, Professor Zishan. I now request Professor Abdul Majid, first year HOD, to welcome the gathering.
Assalamu alaikum and very good morning to one and all present here. I'm sure that as you all are already aware, we gathered here today for the inaugural event of second semester classes for the academic year 2020-21. I, Abdul Majid, head of the department mathematics and first year, delegated with the responsibility of welcoming you all for today's beautiful morning. First of all, it's my immense privilege and pleasure to welcome today's resource person, Sabarinath Venugopalan, Managing Partner for Distribution and Communication Sector, Middle East and Africa, IBM Global Business, for his talk on the topic, Emerging Technologies on an Overview. I personally and on behalf of the PA Educational Trust, I would like to welcome you for today's event, sir, and thank you for your presence here. I am very much thankful today to welcome our guest of honor, Mr. Abdulla Ibrahim, Executive Director, PA Educational Trust, for his continuous support and directions for the success of this institution. Personally and on behalf of PA Educational Trust, I extend my sincere welcome to you for today's event, sir.
Thank you.
We are pleased and honored today with the presence of our beloved principal, Dr. Ramis M.K. Thank you for your presence here, sir, and welcome you for today's event.
Thank you, Majid.
I extend my warm welcome to our beloved vice principal, Dr. Sharmila Kumari, and heads of various departments present here. Without extending further much, we have our faculty coordinator, Professor Ismail Shafi, head of the department physics, and Professor Mishra, Department of Mathematics, and all other faculties. I welcome you all as well for today's event. I also welcome the integral part of today's event, my beloved students. Welcome you all and wishing you all a good session and good day ahead. By thanking the management for this opportunity and also thank you all for listening to me all this while. I would like to send a single note of welcome to you all again for today's event. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. A warm welcome to you as well, Professor Abdul Majid. It is indeed a privilege to have with us a young and dynamic leader, our beloved Executive Director, Mr. Abdulla Ibrahim. Now, I invite him to address the gathering. Over to you, sir.
Assalamu alaikum and a very good morning to you all. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yes.
It is a great pleasure and honor for us to have with us Mr. Sabarinath Venugopalan today for the inauguration of the second semester engineering classes. Mr. Sabarinath is part of a company which has been in the forefront of emerging technologies, the topic of today.
Yes,
The IBM company has been doing everything in the 20th and 21st centuries, and has been a great part of a lot of things which we use and deal with today. This topic is of immense importance towards the building of our country and the world as a whole. AI, IoT, blockchain, big data are all taking over the way we see the world today. Generally, all the branches of engineering have seen a great jump in technologies. The students, our students have the great mantle of responsibility to join this bandwagon when they are done with their education in our institution. This pandemic has been very distressful and has caused us a lot of upset, and it has made us now do everything from our homes, and offline education where it was supposed to take place, now online education is taking place. This will pass through, definitely, by the will of God. It will pass through, and we will be able to see each other as soon as possible. Engineering requires a lot of hands-on experience, which we are not able to provide because of this situation. Anyhow, we have to be very happy that we got an opportunity for a person like Mr. Sabarinath to come amongst us and give an invited talk. I thank Dr. Ramis, our principal, and Dr. Sharmila, our vice principal, for taking the effort to make sure this event happens. And I am sure, I'm 100% sure that you will leave today's event with a lot of new knowledge and a lot of new things which you have not heard before. And I wish you all the best for this event. Thank you very much. Hello.
Thank you, sir.
Please continue.
Before listening to the expert, we now have the opportunity to listen to our own intellectual speaker, Dr. Ramis M.K, the principal of our institute. I request him to deliver the presidential address. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Shireen. Is Sabarinath the guest on screen? He's there. I think he has left in between. Mitra madam?
No, sir, he is there.
I'm here.
Okay. Thank you, Sabarinath.
Good morning.
Today's chief guest and speaker, Mr. Sabarinath, my school classmate, Executive Director, Mr. Abdulla Ibrahim, Vice Principal, Dr. Sharmila Kumari, the heads of the departments, faculty members, and my dear students. As all of you know, indeed, actually we are all through a tough situation. The first wave and the second wave, and the people are really apprehensive about the future, what is going to happen. But whenever I talk to Sabarinath, he gives a lot of energy, and he used to tell that this pandemic is going to give or going to accelerate the technologies which were in, and it is going to give rise to more new technologies. And your batch, 2020 batch, who is going to be out in 2024, will really have a big contribution in bringing this technology up. So it is basically very important for you to take care of these 4 years and upskill yourself along with your academic schedule with the recent technologies. And that is one of the reasons that right from the first semester itself, apart from your regular academics, we have started training on the recent upcoming technologies like robotics, Python, Julia, artificial intelligence, machine learning. Every semester you have one additional course that we have introduced, and this semester also we'll be doing it. I request all the students to attend such sessions and the regular academic sessions seriously, and also to take the maximum benefit out of this session. I assure that this session is going to be very fruitful, very useful, because he is a man, Sabarinath, actually, who is in, as our executive director has pointed out, who is very much updated with the recent technologies, especially at IBM, and he travels across the world. Today morning, he's in Sweden, now in Stockholm. He's delivering the talk from Stockholm. And you will be, of course, benefited. I thank Mr. Sabarinath for giving us his valuable time and all the HODs and the students for today's session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. It is now time for the most awaited moment to hear from Mr. Sabarinath. Before handing over the session to him, I would like to introduce him. Sabarinath Venugopalan is a managing partner for distribution and communication sectors at IBM Services in Middle East and Africa. He also led a multi-year digital transformation at a top global fashion retailer at Stockholm, Sweden. He joined IBM in 2001 and rose to be one of IBM's youngest executives in Europe. At IBM, he distinguishes with a successful track record of business transformation and global expansion for his clients in 6 continents through innovative use of technology. Among other notable engagements, he is responsible for strategy, client value, and business performance of IBM's consulting, systems integration, digital agency, business process outsourcing, and application management businesses within the industry. Currently, his major projects are aimed at enabling digital transformation for large global clients using artificial intelligence, automation, and blockchain. At present, he lives in Dubai. He is active as a keynote speaker, startup coach, early investor, and is an active leader within the Indian community. He follows tennis, politics, and travels to unwind. Today, he will be enlightening us on an overview of emerging technologies, which will enable us to have insights on advancing technologies like artificial intelligence, machine learning, blockchain, etc. With this, I humbly request Mr. Sabarinath Venugopalan to take over the session. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Sareen, and namaste, everyone. Thanks for that very generous welcome, and thanks for having me here. So good morning to all of you, my dear students, respected members of the faculty, Director Abdulla, and Principal Ramis, my dear friend over the last 35 years. Am I audible at the moment?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Excellent, thank you. So it's an honor and a privilege for me to be here with you today, right? Firstly, because I get the chance to speak to you, my dear students, right? For you represent our future, right? We, the faculty, people like us in the industry, your parents, we are all going to get old in a world that you run, right? So for me, it's an honor and privilege to speak with you at any moment, and I don't take that privilege very lightly. Second, I've had the honor of meeting with your chairman, a very impressive man, and having learned through very brief interactions with him. So I'm very happy to be at an institution that he founded. And last, but perhaps not the least, I'm really, really honored to be at an institution where my dear friend Ramis is principal. We know each other for 35 years. We were in primary school together. Ramis, of course, was a very good student. I mean, he's clearly a distinguished academic. I was one of the guys on the back bench. And I must tell you this, when we were young, I didn't like Mr. Ramis a lot, right? Because he was one of these very studious guys, and he used to go home. He lived near where I lived. And my mother used to always tell me that, why don't you be like him, like a good student, right? But then, as I got older, I've got to really admire Ramis and what he's done. And, when he invited me back to your institution, I was happy to say yes. I did visit your campus in 2018, and, phenomenal campus. So guys, thank you once again for listening to me and having me with you. I'm going to try and project a few slides that I've created. What I want to talk to you about is the world we live in today, how we got there, and where are we going to go? And given how we got there and where we're going to go, what do you need to prepare to get the most out of that world? Okay. So this will be an interactive session as much as you want it. So which means if you want to put up your hand, ask a question, please feel free to do so. Okay. So I'm not an academic. But on the other side, I'm a businessman, so I am more than willing to take questions because questions show interest in business, right? And that certainly does in academy as well. But in business, we try to take questions as they occur. Okay, so please bring up your questions, and then that'll be valuable because I get to learn from you much more than you would ever get to learn from me. All right, with that said, I'm going to attempt to put the presentation up now. And let me see if we get there. Can you confirm that you can see my screen?
Not yet, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, it's coming. Yeah.
Okay, very well. So I'm going to go
now
off
we can
camera. Okay, very well. Thank you very much. So I'm going to go off camera now and talk to you through the technology trends that are shaping our world and what you need to do as individuals to take advantage of it. Okay. So I'm going to go back to Jan 2020, right before COVID happened and completely upended our world. So Jan 2020, at that point, our world was changing more than ever before, right? The world was changing at a speed that was then seen as mind-boggling, right? So people used all kinds of monikers to refer to that. So to give you a few examples, at that point, we could speak to anybody in the world practically for free at any time that we chose, right? So communication was at its zenith. You could buy goods and services from pretty much any part of the world at the click of a mouse. Companies like Alibaba, which are only internet-based companies, were selling more on one day, the Chinese Singles Day, more than what established companies like H&M were selling in a whole year, right? The largest, let's say, hoteling company was Airbnb, which never actually owned any hotels. The largest taxi company was Uber, which never had cars, etc., right? The world was becoming fast and furious and highly valuable at that point. Now, was it always like that, right? It certainly wasn't, right? We got there, but not by evolution. We got there by some revolution. So let me take you an example. The screen, on your screen, what you see is average life expectancy at birth for the last 12,000 years, right? Now you see that it remained almost constant, just about 25 years, and then dramatically went up, as the world approached the year 2000. Now, I want to check with you guys as to what do you think is the reason why global life expectancy literally exploded in the 1700s? I need a student to answer me. Don't be shy. Take a guess. I think you guys need an extra, cup of coffee in the morning. So I'll answer that question, okay? So guys, you can't be this shy, all right? In this world, you've got to be bold. So let me answer that question. The reason why life expectancy jumped was the Industrial Revolution, right? At the end of 1700s, as Industrial Revolution kicked in, manufacturing got a lot more mechanized. People started moving into cities and public services improved, wage levels improved, nutrition improved, all of that put together, life expectancy started increasing. So as you say, one thing led to the other, but the incident, the big bang, which started it all was the Industrial Revolution, right? And that pace of change has only accelerated with time through the different revolutions that followed, right? So as I talked about, the first industrial revolution that was mechanical in nature, right? It was followed by the next one about 100 years later, which was the electrical revolution, right? That is when production became really mass and people could actually start affording goods even when they did not have high levels of income. But most of the changes I described to you at the beginning of this talk, they have been made possible by the internet revolution, right? That is where you are able to get goods and services on demand anywhere in the world. And that's where you're able to communicate with anybody at any time of your choice for almost no money. So the industrial revolution was big. Electrical revolution, I mean, the three facets of industrial revolution, right? Mechanical was big, electrical was bigger, internet was even more bigger. The one that's coming next is going to be huge, right? And that is going to change the world much, much more than we've ever seen in the past. And it has just been given a literal shot in the arm. And we will look at that as we go further down. So let's take, as engineers, let's take a step back and look at why did this internet revolution happen, right? What were the building blocks? Now, we talked about mechanical, right? So people started living together or living in closer communities, production started. Then came electricity, which means you could decouple production from the source of energy, right? You've got the internet, which led to globalization. But the internet revolution of the 90s and later was really ushered in by advances in 5 key technologies, right? Number one, you've heard this saying before, right? The Moore's law, right? Where the chips got even more powerful, right? So they doubled the amount of chips that you can have, doubled pretty much every 18 months. So the availability of cheap computing, the availability of fiber, the availability of battery technology and radio technology, and of course the internet, together, coming together, made sure that we all had high-speed broadband wherever we chose to have it. And that's the one which has given rise to pretty much all of the big changes that we've seen in the last 5 to 10 years. So when I started my career, 1998, with Satyam Infoway, which was India's first private internet service provider, so before most of you were born, our fast link to the internet was 2 Mbps. Okay, can you imagine that? The fast link from SIFI's node in Chennai to the internet, the gateway link was 2 megabits per second. Today, your phones have much more data than that, right? Have much more bandwidth than that. So we've come a long way in about 20 years. And the big shift that I've seen is these 5 technologies, right? So the computing, storage, I kind of bundle them together, battery technology, radio technology, and optical fiber technology coming together to deliver internet where it's needed at a very, very low cost, okay? Now, so never forget that most of the revolutions that you see are incremental changes, but happening in rapid succession and one building on top of the other, giving a bit of a domino effect, right? So where 1 + 1 is not 2, but 1 + 1 is probably 3 or 10, right? But I can tell you with full conviction, you haven't seen anything yet, right? The Alibabas, the Ubers, the all Airbnbs, Facebooks, Google, all of these technologies that you see today would pale in comparison, would look like my 2 Mbps link in another 5 years, right? And I must say it like the Americans say it, you ain't seen nothing yet, right? So things are coming so fast down the pike that we will be blown away if we are not prepared, or we could actually go with that current if we are adequately prepared. I'm going to repeat that again. Things are going to come at us at a speed never before known. We will either be knocked off by it, or we can be carried by it if we are sufficiently prepared, okay? Mark my words. If you take away anything else from today, that's what I want you to take away. There's 2 things I want you to take away. This is the first one, okay? Second, in terms of impact, this digital revolution, as we call it, will have 10 times the impact of the internet revolution. Now, you saw what the internet revolution did, how it made life easier, more enjoyable, right? More safer, all of that. Now, the digital revolution will have 10 times that impact. And that is about to get even more. This 10 times measurement was made before a big factor that happened in 2020. But there will be 10 times of that impact going forward, right? And that revolution, like the earlier internet revolution, was built on about 5 factors that I talked about, which came on top of each other. The digital revolution is built on 5 what we call incremental technologies, right? Which is cloud, mobile, AI, IoT, and blockchain. And then there's a lot more of these incremental technologies that are emerging. Now, what's the use of the word incremental technologies, right? These are not new technologies. Cloud is not new, right? Cloud is essentially a data center on steroids, which was powered because you had better processing, better storage, better optic fiber, better battery technology, right? Mobile. Why is the mobile emerging? It's because of all the factors I talked to you about before, right? Battery, silicon, advances in that. And similarly, AI, IoT, and blockchain. Now, these are the ones on top, and there's many others which are coming up, like 3D printing, AR and VR, for example, right? All of these are coming down the pike. So which means as cloud, mobile, AI mature and then become mainstream, there will be many others that are incremental. So your job as engineers and as people who will be working for the next 25, 30 years is much more difficult than the job your faculty had or your parents had or I and Dr. Ramis had, because we had to only contend in our lifetimes with about 2 or 3 shifts in technology. You are going to see a shift in technology every 2-3 years. Okay, so you've got to have a mind which is able to look at the horizon while being able to look at a distance that is close enough to you. So you'll have to have both far vision, right? And you'll have to have near vision at the same time. You cannot afford to lose sight of either or, okay? Because the speed of change is just incremental and it is amazing, right? So let me look at AI, because that's my my pet topic, really, right? And I've been amazed at 2 things pretty much in my engineering career. First is the internet. I mean, I've just seen how the internet completely upended everything I did as a student and then, as a regular citizen up until that point. Now I'm seeing AI having an impact that I never could even imagine. And the thing with AI is we've just started. But why AI, right, at this point? Why didn't AI start in the 1950s when sci-fi movies were already talking about robots serving you coffee and making your food and taking care of you and all of that? Why didn't AI really explode at that point? There are a few reasons, right? First, there was no real need for AI, right? Programmatic systems were enough to handle the amount of data that we had at that point. Now, remember my 2 Mbps line, right? That was in 1998. Imagine in the 50s and 60s, there was hardly any data. But now we are looking at zettabytes of data. And to actually parse through that data, find out what is important and what is not, make judgments, and then act on those judgments requires us to go beyond programmatic systems, right? And that is where AI becomes important, right? AI becomes necessary. So there is a need for AI because of the explosion in data. And second, AI can be delivered because storage is very, very cheap, computing is very, very cheap, and we have wireless optic fiber and battery technology, which allows us to combine or bring the computing power to the place where action is needed, right? So AI is rising because there is a need and because we can do it, right? So that is very important to understand. And that is why it is very, very important to internalize it, because the next several years is going to be the age of AI. AI is still not mainstream, right? In many ways, it is. Now, let me, okay, show of hands is difficult, but let me tell you, reflect a minute. How many of you actually use AI today? Okay. Many of you would say, okay, maybe 20, 30% of you would say, yes, we use AI. Everybody in this room, every single person is using AI today on a daily basis, right? On a very daily basis. Simple. If you've ever used Google Maps to go from one place to the other, you're using AI because that finds the right route depending on traffic, perceived traffic, many other factors, right? If you use the weather channel, you're already using AI, right? So AI is already there, but still it's not mainstream. It's got a long way to go. So, quick difference between programmable systems. Many of you are computer science engineers, and it's very important for you to understand this distinction right now if you don't already know. So I'm going to spend a minute to tell you the difference. Sorry, was there a question?
No, sir. By mistake, someone's audio was on.
No,
Sorry
no
for
problem.
disturbance.
No problem at all. No problem at all. I was wondering if there was a question.
Okay, sir.
So, excellent. So, in terms of programmable systems, right, we've got to find all the permutations and combinations and put them into code, right? For example, you see this cute picture of a cat. Now, a programmable system would say if it's got 4 legs, if it's got, claws, if it makes the sound of meow, if it eats mice, then it's a cat, right? End of story. It can't look at the picture of a cat or the sound of a cat and then determine that it's a cat, right? However, an AI system would be able to look and understand that by comparing what it sees or what it hears with previously fed data, right? Which means these systems understand natural language, they understand unstructured data like sound, like pictures, and then they're able to make a decision based on probability, right? So if it looks 99% similar to the millions of pictures that I've already seen and that is certified to be a cat, then it's a cat. You see the difference? The first is if it has legs, if it makes the sound of meow, if it eats mice, then it's a cat. The other one is if it looks, sounds similar to, or has characteristics similar to the previously learned data, then it is a cat. Now you see the difference goes from writing algorithms in programmatic systems to actually training algorithms in AI systems, right? That is where a lot of the jobs are going to be in the future. It is in writing algorithm, but there'll be a lot more jobs in training the algorithms, okay? So, simple thing, a programmatic system might read "let's eat grandpa" like you see on that screen and get really, really scared and perhaps call the police, right? But an AI system would be able to look at the cakes on the plate, would be able to look at how the grandpa is looking lovingly at his granddaughter, the granddaughter reciprocating that gesture. It is all very relaxed and nice. And then it would decide that, well, what the girl means is that let's eat cake, grandpa, right? So you see the difference. Context, as we say in AI systems, is what differentiates it from programmatic systems. AI systems have context. Programmatic systems don't. So get that in, right? Like humans, we have context in everything we do. AI systems have context. That is the big difference. Context. Context is everything. So how has AI evolved? I'm going to give you a few examples from my own experience, right? So initially, let me go back and tell you about, Hollywood's vision of AI, right? So you have these robotic man, or, the blend between man and robots, superpower kind of thing, or Yendran, if you guys remember that movie in India, right? Those are general AI, right? General purpose AI is pretty much a man replacement. And that's not going to happen for a very long time. Perhaps it will come in at around the time that you're about to retire, right? So you don't have to really worry about that. And you don't have to really worry about narrow AI as well, because that's come and gone, right? That happened while you were still in school, right? So my first experience with AI was working with a company that sold stationaries, right? And stationery is a low margin business, right? So the profit in that business is very, very low. So the only way you make more money is by selling more. And to sell more, you got to make it easy for somebody to buy, right? So you've got to reduce the barrier, the buy barrier. So that's what this company tried to do by giving everybody a little button on their desk or on their mobile phone, or in an area like a cafe, or I mean in a coffee in an office, or in the printer room, right? All they needed to do is press the button and say, I want blue pens, for example. So if I said I want blue pens, because it knows that I'm Shabari, it knows that I like 0.7 Pilot, right? It would automatically order 0.7 Pilot. And because I write very little, it will order me 3 pens in a year. But if, let's say, for an example, if Dr. Ramis, an academic, if he orders, that would be a nice, robust ballpoint pen, which will actually, and it will order him 20 because he reads and writes a lot, right? Or if the same button can be at the coffee machine and say, okay, replenish the coffee, it knows that these are the amounts of coffee that has been consumed. So it's Nescafe, Nespresso, this particular brand that is liked, and it will send it to that particular office, right? So that was the first simple thing. All it needed to do was parse natural language. The second project I was involved in, we call it cognitive fashion. This was taking it another step. Now, here is where we were getting into visual and looking into what looks good on you, right? This was phenomenal for someone like me who's very fashion challenged, right? Who doesn't know what to wear for a right occasion. So here is a product which is able to look at the color of my skin, the contrast between my hair and my skin, the contrast between my eyeballs and my skin, my body type, etc., and say these are the garments that will look good on you, right? It's able to go beyond into my wardrobe and say, since you have all of these clothes, here are the few clothes that you need to buy so that you will be able to get even more combinations, right? So we were going beyond natural language into image, into what you have, structured data of what you have in your cupboard to be able to make selections for you. But those are now maturing, right? Those are things of the past. Those were like until about 2015 when I was involved in those projects. Now we're working on projects which are actually getting into another level, right? So try to comprehend this. Now, some of you have pets. Now, can you really predict the behavior of a pet just a few days after it's born? It's very, very difficult, right? It's very, very difficult. And I hope this never matures enough to be able to predict behavior of human beings, because that would be very dangerous, right? That's the other thing with AI. Ethical use of AI is something that concerns me a lot, because, unethically used AI can be extremely dangerous. But in this case, what we were looking at is that there's a particular breed of dog which is well suited to be a guide dog, right? Now, these dogs are very prized for people who have, hearing and visual impairments and need a proper pet. But as you know, dogs have personality too, right? So some dogs, even though they're in the right breed, are not the perfect guide dogs. And till now, you never really figure that out until the dog has been trained. It goes into a house and the owner gets, or the pet owner, after a while, thinks that, well, this isn't really working for me, right? But today, by observing these animals, right after they're born, their characteristics, how they interact with others and with the ecosystem, we are able to accurately predict how they will turn out to be as guide dogs. So we are able to select, so companies are able to select the right guide dogs and match it to the right individuals, right? So we've gone beyond, parsing through language, parsing through images to really predicting people, animal behavior, right? That's big. The other one, I would try and show it to you if I were with you in person, but an area that I tend to be still very excited about is how AI is able to pick up highlights of a of a game, of a sport, right? So in that picture, what you'll see, let me see if I can play that for you, okay? Usually this doesn't carry well over sharing systems, but let me try. Can you see? Were you guys able to see that? Can I have a confirmation, please?
Yes.
All right, fantastic. So what you saw was an AI system extract a highlight out of hours and hours of video. Yeah. Now, what makes it important is I couldn't play the audio through to you, but you can look at this on YouTube. What you don't hear is that the commentator's voice doesn't go really high pitch or fast like in a soccer game, where it's then very easy to figure out what's a highlight. The commentator's voice and the crowd's response pretty much stays the same. But an AI system was able to figure out, after watching hours and hours of tape, and say that this 2 minutes is the highlight of the entire day, right? So imagine it needs to understand the game of golf. It needs to understand what exactly happened there. It needs to then understand what captures human interest, etc. All of that to bring that to you, right? So we went from natural language to image to behavior to even higher levels of cognition, right? And the work that we are doing today, many of which I can't share with you, are taking these things even further. So AI is around us. It's coming fast. Okay. Now, go back to Jan 2020. I told you that there was one incident which has put steroids into the digital revolution, and that's COVID-19. And before I go any further, I'd like us to spend 10 seconds thinking of the loved ones that we've lost and the ones who are actually fighting hard to keep all of us safe. So I'll take 10 minutes pause and then I'll resume. Okay. Thank you. So COVID's changed our world more than pretty much any other revolution has changed, right? We went from being this hyper globalized people, right? If someone told us in Jan of 2020 that we would spend the whole of next year pretty much locked up in our houses, talking to each other over, video and audio, not able to go out and play, go out and watch a movie, fly to wherever we wanted to, we'd laugh at that person, right? I remember distinctly Jan 2020, I was in New York and I was, my father suffered a health issue in India, so he's in Calicut. And I was looking at flight options, and I could be home in about 24 hours, right? 24 hours from that phone call, I could have been home. Today, I have not been home since that trip in Feb 2020 to India. That's the longest I've stayed away from my parents, right? You guys have had pretty much your first year. I don't know, most of you have probably done that on video. The world has been upended, right? And with great difficulty comes great opportunity, right? A lot of the advances of the 60s and 70s and all the way up to 2000s came through technology developed during the world wars, right? Especially the Second World War. The Second World War gave rise to several then incremental technologies, right? Which after the misery of war was over, we all, the ones who remained and the ones who came after, stayed back to enjoy. And when COVID-19 passes, right, in a year or two, there would be several benefits that it has left in its very destructive way, right? And I say this very consciously. It's probably been the biggest tragedy that we'll see. But for us in later years and for generations to come, it will also leave a lot of good things, right? It seems strange to say it. I'm not being insensitive saying that, but as an engineer, it's important for us to be able to state the truth as the way it stays, right? So COVID-19, bad, But in net, I think it's going to be beneficial for the world. So let me tell you how, right? So we talked about all of the trends that came before, but the trends that were really accelerated by COVID-19 is remote work, digitization, and automation. And I'm going to take some examples, but look at all the disruption that happened during COVID. All of that disruption happened in jobs that require high physical proximity, right? So jobs that where you have to go to a barber shop, right, to a restaurant, to get medical care in a hospital, to study in a classroom, to go watch a movie, where you needed to be in proximity with each other. Those jobs and those functions were very badly disturbed. But jobs which did not require physical proximity, right, like IT, for example, right, actually boomed. So that's the reason why, even though COVID-19 upended the world as we know it, economic activity did not dramatically reduce. Yet it reduced. India's growth rate went down by about -8% last year, but we are going to grow back at 12% this year and at about 9-10% the year after, right? So we would have grown back the loss by about September of this year. And that has come only because of the previous three revolutions. And in my
Hello, sorry for the disturbance, sir.
Yes.
Now we can hear you, sir. In
Oh,
between,
you lost me at some point?
just 1 minute back.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. I didn't notice. Probably my phone went on mute as it locked.
Yeah, sir. Yeah.
All right. So thank you for that. So what I was telling you is that this trends accelerated by COVID, remote work, digitization, and automation. I'll give you a personal example, right? So 2019, the full year before COVID, I took an average of 3 or 4 flights in a week. Okay, so we travel out to trade shows, travel out to our research centers in the US, travel out to see clients in Europe, travel back to see my team members in India, China, wherever they are, travel for leisure, pleasure. So on an average, I took between 3 and 4 flights a year in 2019. 2020, whole year, I took 7 flights, and 3 of them were in Jan, right? So you see the difference between being mobile 150, 160 times a year to being mobile 5 times a year. So everybody needed to learn new tricks. And for me, the new trick was leading a global workforce without being present. I'm one of the people who believes that you've got to be present, you've got to shake a hand, you've got to look people in the eye to be able to lead effectively or to be able to serve effectively my clients. So all of us had to learn new tricks. I had to learn to be able to motivate and lead a workforce spread across the world across a video camera, right? We had to move my entire workforce to remote working over a weekend. I had my apprehensions, but I can tell you that work happened without any disruption and the output and quality of work only increased. And this has been repeated many, many times over the years. So remote work is here to stay. Your generation, when you come out in 2024, you are going to work a significant amount of time remote and on your own. So master your skills at digital collaboration. Be really good at working together with people without physical proximity. Right? That's number one. Second, when we went around to clients and asked them to digitize and ask e-commerce firms to adopt more e-commerce, it was never high priority. It was priority, but it was never high priority. But by the second quarter last year, by April, May last year, clients were really knocking at our doors, telling us that, hey, can you get us to e-commerce fast? Can you get us digital? Please help us with digital marketing, all of that, right? So the amount of work that we as a technology company did in digitization just skyrocketed. That's why today the number of jobs in IT in India are much more this year than it was in 2019, right? So that shows all of the previous revolutions that's built a kind of resiliency into our world, right? So many a times it's easy for us to say, the good old days, but that's just a myth, right? The good days are right now, despite COVID, right? For those of us lucky enough not to lose a loved one or be sick ourselves, the good days are going to be also in the future, right? As digitization and remote works come together, and a lot of the boring work gets automated away, right? So there was a tremendous increase in the amount of automation and robotics that I have seen clients implementing world over as a response to COVID, right? So the world that we live in is going to be even better, is going to be even easier, it's going to be even more enjoyable. Some of you will not have to commute on an everyday basis or get on a plane like I did 4 times a week and still enjoy a high standard of living and still enjoy a high work satisfaction, right? So get this into your heads. Jobs requiring high physical proximity are being threatened. Jobs requiring low physical proximity and high intellectual ability are on the rise. So let's look at how labor demand will change dramatically. This is very important for the decisions that you make in the next 3 years, right? Leading up to your graduation. You see on the left of the screen, office support, customer service, production, etc. Those jobs are disappearing or reducing. And that's reducing because of automation, AI, and all of those technologies I talked to you about. Jobs on the right-hand side, right, require an intellectual ability, require some level of proximity, require context, which automated and AI systems are today not able to deliver. That's where the growth is. So you see, for a negative 17% in office support, there is a plus 36% in health and wellness, and 24 in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. So that 24% increase is what you are aiming towards, okay? So the amount of jobs for you in the world is only going to rise. The amount of opportunities for you is going to rise. Make big advantage of that, okay? You as engineers are coming into a world where the world is going to be screaming for your talent. Make sure that you have the right skills. And I'll tell you what I believe are the top 4 you should have, okay? So moving on. With digitization, digital revolution, and COVID, the world really is your playground, right? With all of the remote working, now I've got team members pretty much in several countries working together as one unit, right? We are able to start off projects without a lot of lead time because I can pick people available wherever they are, put them together in one team, and then get on with work, right? So the whole world is your playground. It is an opportunity and a threat at the same time. It's an opportunity because if you're good and if you have the right talent, you can sell your talent to anybody in the globe. It's also a threat because you will be competing with everybody across the world, right? So when your parents and, when our grandparents probably started out, they only had to compete with people in their respective states. When most of your faculty, or at least, people in Dr. Ramis and my age group started out, we had to compete with people across India, across the country. You guys will have to compete with the talented kids coming out of China, South America, the US, Stockholm, Dubai, you name it, okay? So it is very, very important to have cutting edge skills all the time. The world's your playground. It is an opportunity and a threat. India, our country, will continue to be a growth engine for the global economy. We will continue, despite of all the negativity you see. And I say that again, despite of all the negativity you see in here, India will be the growth engine for the global economy. We will be the fastest growing large economy in the world in 2021 and beyond. It's right now, right? We will be the largest, fastest growing large economy in the world. It gives you access to a market, a large market, which is only now being revolutionized and only now growing at that frenetic pace. So look inside the country for problems that you can solve, because if you find a problem that you can solve, it can scale quickly in India, and then it can scale very easily globally. Okay. So India, my young students, is your opportunity. It is our country that gives you the biggest opportunity of them all at the moment. So look at problems that you can see everyday life in India. See how you can bring the incremental technologies I talked to you about to solve them. Because the next Facebook, the next Google, the next Microsoft is going to come out of our country. And I'd like to see some of you make that happen. And I don't say that lightly. It's not difficult. You just have to keep your eyes open, and you just have to keep your brains ready to take in new technologies as they come. You have the power. You have the power to make that happen. So let me give you this example, right? See how India has grown in terms of our economy size, right? And I've compared that with Sweden because I was talking to a bunch of students here. You see how we have diverged in our economic growth. Now, Sweden is a developed country. It's a large state, a lot of natural resources. You see how their growth has gone since the 60s, and see how our growth has gone. And digitization and COVID is only going to accelerate that. So I'm a big believer in India, right? You should be too. Because if you look at opportunities, problems in our country, you'd be able to make lots of money while improving the lives for a lot of our countrymen. So why do I believe we can do it? Is because, and I've talked to students pretty much all over the world, not all over, but at least in about 5 to 10 countries in the world, 10 plus countries in the world, right? We as Indians, we are a resilient lot, right? There would be flood in one part of the country while there will be famine, while there will be drought in another part of the country, right? So we are ready and we are able to take uncertainty. And when I go talk to students elsewhere, I see that as our biggest strength. Our ability to take uncertainty is amazing. Second is our ability to compete. All of you started competing when you were 3 years and 3 months old. Most people in the developed world don't go to school until they are 7 years old. You guys know how to compete, right? Too much competition can be a bad thing, but that level of competitiveness is good, right? We've seen power outages, we've seen hartals, we've had to compete for resources, like even getting into a train can be a sport in India, right? So we've got that backing. I haven't seen an Indian, or I've seen very few Indians who get stressed by ambiguity. The world ahead is going to be very ambiguous. And I believe that we have the ability to tackle it, right? And the third thing I always see is our ability to go for ingenious solutions, the jugaad approach that we have in our DNA. You look at that Jeep in the picture, you look at the wheels on it, right? So the wheels have been replaced, the regular wheels, with railway wheels so that people can drive in comfort while they inspect the railway tracks, right? Simple, ingenious, efficient, right? So we have in our DNA to compete, we have in our DNA to take ambiguity, take difficulty, and we have the jugaad flowing in our veins. So you have the power. So you have all of these as individuals. You've got a big growing country, and now suddenly the world is your playground. Take advantage of it. You're at the right place at the right time. And I say that with a lot of conviction. And if I were to wish for another life, I'd like to be born and come back and be at university like you guys. All right. And I mean that. So what are the building blocks that we need for you to succeed in the world that's ahead of us, right? We've looked at the revolutions, how we got here. We looked at how the digital revolution is going to really amp up what we've seen. We looked at how COVID's going to put steroids into that effort. And we've looked at how you are at the right place at the right time. So what do you need to take full advantage of it? In my view, there are four things. First, build your personal brand. Each one of you should be known. Your values should be known. What you can achieve should be known, right? It's like with Nike, just do it. Nike is a company that encourages the amateur athlete in all of us to go and achieve something in sport, right? So it's very simple. When you see Nike, you know, it's just do it, right? So it is that when I see each one of you, your personal brand should scream out. So spend some time, perhaps, you know, you want to talk to your faculty to really understand how do you develop your personal brand. First of all, how do you understand what your personal brand is? How do you develop it, right? It requires you to have a strong point of view. It requires you to have clear vision and a core set of values. So I'd urge you this week, right? Not next month, not during the holidays, this week, you go and Google how do you build your personal brand and have a conversation with your faculty about how you go about doing that. Each one of you need to have a personal brand that is very clear. That's number one. That's what we lack in India, right? While we have a lot of competitive people, it is very difficult to distinguish among people because the personal brand doesn't shout out. That's the difference I see between our students in India and students in Europe, for example, right? Second, you have to learn to code. There's no other way, right? So when I was getting into business, you know, as a young engineer, my bosses pretty much, you know, the executives played golf and took clients out to dinner. The managers made PowerPoint presentations, and people like us did coding and technology work, right? As I became a manager, unfortunately, you know, we had to do the technical work and do the presentations while the executives, you know, played the golf and the wining and dining. And when I got promoted as an executive, I had to do all three, right? I had to code, I had to do the presentation and do the wining and dining, right? So learning to code, and I heard Python being mentioned here before, right? So learning to code is absolutely critical. It's perhaps more important than any other subject that you will read in the 4 years in college, right? Learn to manipulate data, learn to analyze data, learn to present data, learn to make systems do what you want it to do. So programming skills need to be top priority. Third, and perhaps the one that's most important and close to my heart, is while we are very good at competing, we as Indians, we are terrible at collaborating. I'm going to repeat that. We're terrible at collaborating, perhaps because competition is drilled into us from a very young age, right? That is the difference between students I see in Europe and China with students in India. When we've got to manage a young team in India, we have to manage each person as individuals, and the 1 + 1 + 1 is always lesser than 3. Whereas in Europe and China, 1 + 1 + 1 is always greater than 3. So learn to work with each other. Learn to collaborate, right? Sit in your rooms, but then still, you know, collaborate with each other, developing things, doing your homework, you know, doing your science projects, whatever. Don't be the lone wolf. The era of the lone wolf, one man or woman achieving things alone, is gone. You've got to compete and you've got to collaborate. Okay. There's a word called frenemies. Frenemies. Look it up. Okay. The last, be bold. Don't have a vision that is set by the previous generation. Be bold. Don't look at getting into a job. I mean, of course, I mean, you can do that, but always look at problems that you can solve. Take time out to solve them. Try to create something, right? Fail fast. Try it out, fail fast. And if it's succeeding, scale it fast, right? Build it out. Because you've got a very, very unique opportunity, guys, right? You are at the cusp of a major revolution. You are engineering students. You've got the entire power of the world in your hands. You've got to experiment, right? The biggest mistake you can make at this moment is not trying, okay? So to recap, build your personal brand. Do that this weekend. Start work on that this weekend. Learn how to code. Super important, right? Let that guide you for the next 30 years. Think about how you will collaborate and compete at the same time. And every time you see an opportunity, do something about it. Fail fast, scale fast. Okay. That brings me to the end of the session. And I want to leave you with a quote from Michael Jordan, right? Very apt for youngsters like you. Now, Michael says, I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. 26 times, he was to take the winning shot and he missed. He failed over and over again, and that's why he succeeded. If that works for Michael Jordan, that works for us. Okay. So my dear students, once again, thank you very much for listening to me. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm very, very privileged once again to be here. And if, I'd be happy to take any questions that you may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your insightful thoughts on emerging technologies. I now keep the session open for discussion. Students and staff, if you have any queries, you can ask our expert. Mitra, ma'am?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, if there are any questions available on the chat box.
Students, you can put your questions in the chat box also. As per now, some responses they have given it, when sir has presented. Sir, I think you can see the chat box where
yes,
yeah. One of the students wants to know more about Sweden, I feel, or he loves Sweden.
I love Sweden. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. I love it too. Okay, so how do you become successful in your business? I think that's more for Abdulla. I mean, he's more of a businessman than I am, but I'll give you an example of how, or at least what I have seen has succeeded in the business of technology, right? And how do you? So I'm going to separate organizational success from personal success, right? So companies that succeeded in the technology business, right? They have tried to do one thing very, very well, right? So you look at Salesforce, for example. Now they're very good at CRM, right? You look at Adobe, they're very good at publishing. You look at Microsoft, they were very good at desktop, then they transformed themselves to become very good at cloud, right? So it is that focus and depth, which I have seen, is one of the most biggest factors contributing to success. So focus is number one. Second is what I told you about being bold, right? It's important to take bold steps as a business to be able to succeed, right? Because you get that little prime mover advantage, which becomes very, very important. The first step you take is amplified many times, right? You look at Google, they were not the first search engine, but they were the first search engine to focus on doing search right? So prior to Google, most of your students wouldn't know, you had lots of search engines. Yahoo was one, but if you went into Yahoo, you would see news on one side, stock market reports on another side, and the search. What Google did, they removed everything. They just focused on getting search right. And when they figured that was what they did, they made a bold bet, they went after it, right? So being bold is very important. Doing one thing really, really well is very important. And third, I think, is building an environment where talent comes and works for you, right? That becomes perhaps the most important thing after your initial growth. So that's about companies. In terms of personal growth, I mean, from the people that I have seen have stellar careers in the technology business, it's not very different, right? Specialization is very important. being open to new experience and challenges is very important. In my own career, not at every point I knew what I wanted to do next, right? An opportunity came, about 3 or 4 opportunities came through my 20 years of career. I think I took them all. I succeeded in 3 and I didn't in 1, right? But that would have been better than staying and avoiding risks altogether, right? So, take risks where you can. Once again, be bold and be known for something. The 4 factors I talked to you about: personal branding, being able to collaborate and compete at the same time, having a strong technology focus. Those are what is really important to become a successful executive in the business of technology. I hope I answered that. It was a long answer, but I thought it was an important question. I like that question from Shabnaz, and thank you for that, Shabnaz. Right? Despite of being the second most populated country, the fastest growing large economy, so advanced in technology, why is India not called a developed country? And what will make it a developed country? Phenomenal question, Shabnaz, and I really appreciate your intellectual acumen in asking that question. That actually is a sad part, right? If you look at India several thousand, or at least a few hundred years ago, we were the largest in the world in terms of GDP, right? Now, what happened is, in many ways, we as a country ignored technology, right? While, if you go back several hundred years, when artisan manufacturing was king, India's GDP was, I think, 25 or 40% of the world, right? But as Europe went into more automated manufacturing and those things, right? Our GDP dropped, Europe went up, right? And we were also not very good at collaborating. We were fighting with each other, allowing foreign forces to come in and take our wealth away, right? So that's a historical reason why, in my opinion, right? I'm not a historian, but in my opinion, that's the reason why we lost that advantage we had in GDP. Now, why are we still not a developed country? I think the answer is there in that population question, right? So let me give you a COVID example. So as of last week, India vaccinated 160 million, 16 crore people, right? That is half of America. That's 1 times Russia, 17 times Australia, and I think 47 times New Zealand, right? So the scale of our country makes developing the country on a whole extremely difficult to achieve, right? The amount of people we have, the amount of land we've got, makes getting development everywhere very difficult. Now, some parts of our country are as developed as any developed country in the world, whereas some other parts of the country are, much below that standard, right? So it's really that scale that, Shabnaz, I believe, is the reason why we are still not yet there. But I believe firmly that your generation will change it. The very simple reason that you asked that question makes me firmly believe that your generation is going to change that, because you're going to grow all sections, and that suddenly, this whole distinction between developed and developing countries will go away. India will be at the top of the world when it comes to all of the factors that today goes into being called developed. Good question. I hope I was able to answer that. All right. So going into the other question from Aditya, how will technology generate profit for a company? So look, it depends on what company you are, right? If you're a technology company, the answer is obvious. But if you're, let's say, a grocery company, right? I'll take you an example of Majid Al Futtaim, which is a grocer, which is a conglomerate in the Middle East. Now, they run the chain called Carrefour. So many of you who've been in the Middle East would have definitely known this firm, Carrefour. When the shutdown hit, the grocery business in the Middle East, Majid Al Futtaim had invested in enough e-commerce technology that their revenues from e-commerce went up 400 to 500 times, right? So Technology generates profit for a standard business by making it easy to attract customers, by making it easy to service and sell to those customers, right? So the whole ability to attract, retain, and sell to customers, aided by technology, increases the top line and hence profit or the bottom line, right? It's just that. It's just doing the basic business better with the aid of technology. And I like that statement from Mohammed Saud. Yes, it is all about technology. Technology is everything. You know, most of my clients actually say that these days, you know, that, you know, we are a technology business. Now, they may be a fashion business. Now, they, you know, even fashion companies are becoming technology businesses. Grocers are becoming technology businesses. Taxis are technology businesses, right? So pretty much every business is a technology business. And like Mohammed says on the chat, that's why you chose engineering. Right choice. Yes, PACE Mangalore, absolutely. I mean, the online courses in AI and ML will definitely help adopting new technologies. I think the only distinction that I'd like to do in this is, you know, while the course itself is important, finding practical applications of it even before you design the course is even more important, right? So look at problems in the society around you, look at problems in your own institution that can be solved by AI and machine learning, and then build your course around it. That would be my advice to you, right? So until today, academics is a solution looking for a problem. Turn it the other way around. Pick a problem and make your academic course to resolve that problem.
Thank you, sir. This is Mitra, professor from Department of Mathematics. I have posed a question because future we are thinking of giving credits for some of the online courses. So on that aspect, I have posed that question. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Professor Mitra. Very well. I think we are at the end of the chat session as well. So once again, thank you very much for listening. It's been an honor and a privilege, and I wish you all the very best. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Sabarinath. Thank you very much for being part of our program today, and it was extremely insightful. And I hope a good percentage of the students take into heart what you have, all the points you have mentioned today, because I also personally definitely feel that these are the points that will take you towards success in life. And like in astrology, you have predicted what's coming up in the future as well in the coming years, how things are going to change and at what speed they're going to change. And definitely, I believe that our students will definitely take up the challenge and they will move forward, on the points we have discussed today.
Excellent. Thank you. Namaste and Jai Hind.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir, you can read the chat box, sir, where our students have thanked, our faculty as well as students have thanked. And among that, Sarfaraz has told that it is one of the best motivation received from you so far.
Thank you, Sarfaraz. You made my day today. Thank you. And it was really a privilege for me to be here. And I do hope that when things settle down, I'll have a chance to come back to your very beautiful campus.
Sharin ma'am, over to you.
Thank you, sir. And I want to also thank you for sharing a very wonderful message today by saying that we already have it in our DNA, the ability to tackle the ambiguity that we face in the coming years. So thank you very much. That was really empowering for me. So with that being said, before we conclude, we have with us Professor Vittal Bhatt to express few words of appreciation and gratitude. Over to you, sir.
A graceful and warm morning to our most valued guest, college management, worthy teachers, and most beloved students. It is my privilege to have been asked to propose a vote of thanks. At the outset, I thank our chief guest and resource person, Mr. Sabarinath Venugopalan, who spared time from his busy schedule to grace this occasion. Dear sir, thank you for sharing your insight in emerging technologies and also for seeding a unique vision in our students. We are really enlightened with your knowledge and presence. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I also extend my thanks to guest of honor, our Executive Director, Mr. Abdulla Ibrahim, for his enormous cooperation in the organization of this event and also gracing the event with your presence throughout the session. Thank you, sir. I would like to thank our dynamic principal, Dr. Ramis M.K, for being the catalyst that inspired us to do our best and stand as a pillar of power. Thank you, sir. A special mention to our Vice Principal, Dr. Sharmila Kumari, for her enthusiastic support throughout the induction program. A special thanks to HODs of various departments for their unflinching support and coordination. I also extend thanks to all the teaching and non-teaching staffs for their cooperation. I especially thank the people who have been the backbone of the event, the main coordinators, event coordinators, and master of ceremony for planning and executing a worthy induction training program. Finally, I would like to thank the budding rock stars who have turned up in large numbers throughout the induction program and made it a successful one with their active participation in all the events. Once again, I thank all for cordial cooperation and let us begin a new semester with a new ray of hope. Thank you. Stay blessed, stay safe.
Thank you. Bye-bye.